Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Tuesday, 15th April, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is navigating a complex landscape of economic and political challenges, amplified by escalating trade tensions with the United States. In a retaliatory move against U.S. tariffs imposed by President Trump, China has instructed its airlines to suspend further deliveries of Boeing jets and Halt purchases of aircraft-related equipment and parts from American companies. President One, during a tour of Southeast Asia, emphasized the need to uphold the multilateral trading system and condemned what he called U.S. unilateral bullying during meetings with Vietnam's Commie leader To Lam and visits to Malaysia to strengthen trade ties. Chinese chip traders are reporting a significant drop in orders due to tariffs, while European countries are bracing for a potential influx of artificially cheap products diverted from the U.S. market. China has also suspended exports of certain rare earth minerals and magnets, essential components for industries like car manufacturing, semiconductors, and aerospace. These materials are crucial for the Pentagon and defense contractors, who depend on Chinese-sourced rare earth minerals for the production of fighter jets, warships, missiles, tanks, and lasers, as China produces 90% of the world's rare earth magnets. Police in Harbin have accused the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, of launching cyber attacks during the Asian Winter Games and have offered rewards for information on 3 alleged NSA agents involved. Swear Properties, a Hong Kong developer, remains bullish on mainland China, seeking retail investments in Shenzhen amid the onshoring of consumption. Nomura is scaling back its China Wealth unit, shifting its focus to brokerage and assets, and is seeking a new CEO for its securities business on the mainland. China is investing in a battery-swapping ecosystem for electric vehicles through a collaboration between CATL and Sinopec. The AI unicorn Jipu is planning to file for an IPO. China is also concerned about its dependence on Africa's resources as the U.S. increases its influence in the region. The United States, under President Trump, is locked in an escalating trade war with China, characterized by tariff impositions and reciprocal actions. Trump has suggested that China's diplomatic efforts, including Xi Jinping's tour of Southeast Asia, are aimed at undermining the U.S. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has accused China of engaging in rapacious deals with developing nations, prompting a strong response from Beijing. The U.S. is facing accusations of cyber attacks from China, with Chinese police alleging that the NSA launched attacks during the Asian Winter Games. Turning to the United Kingdom, a dispute at a Chinese-owned steel company in the UK might cause a re-evaluation of the relationship between the two countries, which was recently becoming closer. Finally, a call has been made for the United States to pursue parallel nuclear negotiations with both China and Russia. United States. The Trump administration is under fire for its handling of Kilmar Abrigo Garcia's case, a Maryland father wrongly deported to El Salvador. Despite a U.S. Supreme Court ruling for his release, the administration defends its actions, stating it cannot facilitate his return because he's in El Salvador, while El Salvador views assisting him as smuggling. Abrigo Garcia was deported to the Thesicot mega prison under a partnership with Nayib Bukele. Conflicting claims surround the U.S. court's stance on Abrigo Garcia's deportation, with allegations that Trump and Bukele disregarded the ruling. The Trump administration has also initiated investigations into pharmaceutical and semiconductor imports, potentially imposing tariffs based on national security grounds under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, with a 21-day comment period and a 270-day completion deadline. NVIDIA plans a $500 billion investment in US AI infrastructure, over 4 years, signaling domestic growth amidst tariff threats, which follows Trump's tariff reiteration and Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang's dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Investors are reportedly moving away from the US dollar due to Trump's tariff policies, with the euro gaining traction as a safe haven. In Massachusetts, a US-born immigration lawyer, Nicole Micciarone, received a notice of termination of parole from immigration authorities, requiring her to leave the country despite her US citizenship. Palestinian activist Mohsen Matawi, a legal permanent resident, was detained during his citizenship interview, with his lawyer alleging retaliation for his pro-Palestinian views. Matawi, a Columbia University student and critic of the Gaza war, was arrested in Vermont just before the interview. Allison Riggs, a Democratic justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court, is fighting to retain her seat after a court ruling threatened to overturn her election victory, which she believes is an existential threat to democracy, and the court ordered the State Board of Elections to give overseas voters 30 days to prove their eligibility. Meta Chief Mark Zuckerberg testified at a landmark U.S. antitrust trial, where the Federal Trade Commission accuses Meta of abusing its market power to acquire Instagram and WhatsApp preemptively. A 27-year-old US tourist was deported from Bali, Indonesia, after a rampage at a medical clinic. 5 years after the death of celebrated Chinese scientist Nongyan Tao. In the U.S., a police report concluded Tao died by suicide amid work-related stress. A second U.S. aircraft carrier is operating in the Mideast waters ahead of the next round of talks between Iran and the United States over Tehran and Rs-Its rapidly advancing nuclear program. Russia. Kursk's acting mayor, Sergei Kotlyarov, reported a Ukrainian drone attack that killed 1 woman and injured 9 others. The attack damaged a multi-story apartment building, causing fires and requiring residents to evacuate to a nearby school. Russian spy chief Sergei Naryshkin made comments that are likely to stoke concern that Russia could threaten other European states after Ukraine, with threats against Poland and the Baltic states. According to Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, Vladimir Putin is open to a peace deal with Ukraine, but Foreign Minister Lavrov warns that agreeing terms will not be easy. Russia claims its deadly missile attack on Ukraine's Sumy that killed and wounded scores, including children, had targeted a gathering of Ukrainian troops as condemnation grows. Russia can benefit from the tariff war with the US and China, but not necessarily by selling more energy and produce to China. Ukraine. A Ukrainian drone attack on Kursk, Russia, resulted in 1 death and 9 injuries. The attack damaged a multi-story apartment building, leading to fires and the evacuation of residents to a local school, as reported by Kursk's acting mayor, Sergei Kotlyarov. According to Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, Vladimir Putin is open to a peace deal with Ukraine, but Foreign Minister Lavrov warns that agreeing terms will not be easy, and Trump blames Zelensky for the war. Russia claims its deadly missile attack on Ukraine's Sumy that killed and wounded scores, including children, had targeted a gathering of Ukrainian troops as condemnation grows. According to Donald Trump's special envoy, the U.S. is on the verge of a peace deal with Ukraine. He also hinted at compelling commercial opportunities for the U.S. following his meeting with Russia's president. European Union. The European Commission is considering allowing European companies to break long-term Russian gas contracts without facing penalties. This involves allowing companies to declare force majeure, thus avoiding penalty fees for contract termination, as part of efforts to eliminate reliance on Russian fossil fuels by 2027. US Vice President Vance tells EU, "I love, but don't be permanent security vassal of us," stating, I don't want the Europeans to just do whatever the Americans tell them to do. China. Trump's high tariffs on China are expected to negatively impact tech companies, fashion firms, and agribusinesses. A top internet official warns that US efforts to hobble China's AI march can only backfire and calls for greater regional cooperation and to zero-sum mindsets amid US tariff risks. Russia can benefit from the tariff war with the US and China, but not necessarily by selling more energy and produce to China. US envoy warns Hungary over Chinese investments, calling for unity, stating that this isn't about choosing sides, this is about preserving control over your own future, says Robert Palladino. Harvard University. Donald Trump threatened Harvard University's tax-exempt status after it resisted demands, including shutting down D programs. Obama and Yale faculty have voiced support for Harvard after Trump cut $2 billion in federal grants, alleging anti-Semitism. Barack Obama, Yale, and other academic institutions are supporting Harvard after the Trump administration cut $2 billion in federal grants due to the university's rejection of government regulation. Obama praised Harvard for defending academic freedom and promoting an environment of intellectual inquiry and mutual respect. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele met with U.S. President Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Trump lauded Bukele as the world's coolest dictator and encouraged him to construct more prisons. Trump also expressed his desire to deport homegrown criminals to El Salvador. However, Bukele has refused to return Kilma Abrigo Garcia, a Maryland man wrongly deported to a Salvadorian mega-prison. This refusal persists despite a U.S. Supreme Court ruling mandating his return. Bukele stated he would not smuggle a terrorist into the United States. Top Trump administration officials echoed this sentiment, emphasizing Abrigo Garcia's Salvadoran citizenship. They asserted the U.S. has no authority over his future, contradicting previous court filings and findings. The Trump administration had been ordered by a court to facilitate the return of Abrigo Garcia, who was deported without due process. A lawyer for Abrigo Garcia has suggested a contempt order may be necessary to prompt U.S. officials to facilitate his return. The Trump administration also sent 238 migrants to prison in El Salvador under a wartime act, alleging gang membership with little evidence. Ukraine. Following a Russian strike on Sumy, NATO chief Mark Rutte visited Odessa, Ukraine, to express unwavering support to President Zelensky. Ukrainian forces claimed responsibility for striking the Russian brigade believed to be behind the attack. Residents of Sumy, which was struck on Palm Sunday, expressed doubts regarding the potential for a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's envoy, suggested that Vladimir Putin is receptive to a permanent peace agreement with Ukraine that goes beyond a mere ceasefire. Donald Trump placed blame on President Zelensky and Joe Biden for the commencement of the war in Ukraine, asserting that they performed an absolutely horrible job. United Kingdom. The UK co-hosted a conference in London with France, Germany, the EU, and the African Union to mark the second anniversary of the civil war in Sudan. Ministers from 14 countries and UN representatives were in attendance, with a focus on establishing political coherence regarding Sudan's future. Amidst rising global trade tensions, the UK has reduced tariffs on numerous products and announced increased financing for exporters. The British economy saw a growth of 0.5% in February. Chinese researchers are poised to access 500,000 UKG records through UK Biobank, a research hub holding medical data from 500,000 volunteers. This access is proceeding despite security concerns from Western intelligence agencies. Analysis suggests that 1 in 5 successful access applications originate from China. Alison McGovern, Minister at the Department for Work and Pensions, addressed UK job statistics showing a decrease of 78,000 payrolled workers. The Labour Party plans to revitalize employment through job center overhauls, job creation, skills transformation, and a transition to net zero. McGovern also condemned China's refusal to grant entry to a British parliamentarian for a family visit. The National Education Union, NU, has labelled Reform UK as far-right and racist, and described Nigel Farage as a pound-shop Donald Trump, pledging funds to oppose Reform UK candidates in upcoming elections. Italian Defence Minister Guido Crosetto criticised the UK for not fully sharing fighter jet project technology with Italy and Japan. A Titanic passenger's pocket watch recovered from the North Atlantic is scheduled for auction in the UK, estimated to be worth $66,000. European Union. The EU emphasized the need for significant joint efforts to guarantee successful trade negotiations with the US, following a 90-day pause on tariffs. A trade official Maroš Šefčovič met with US officials Howard Lutnick and Jamieson Greer in Washington. China. Despite security concerns from Western intelligence agencies about the potential for the Chinese government to amass health data, China is set to access 500,000 UK GP records via UK Biobank. The UK Minister at the Department for Work and Pensions, Alison McGovern, condemned China's refusal to grant entry to a British parliamentarian for a family visit. Japan is grappling with low national contentment and optimism due to rising living costs, demographic pressures, and perceived political stagnation. Rice prices have more than doubled, averaging 4,214 yen per 5 kilograms, intensifying economic concerns. The Japan Fair Trade Commission issued a cease and desist order against Google for alleged anti-monopoly violations. 4 individuals were arrested for obscene AI-generated images, a first for the country. Japan is constructing naval patrol vessels with autonomous navigation to improve surveillance and reduce manpower. Defense spending for fiscal year 2025 is projected at 9.9 trillion yen, 1.8% of the GDP, 3 years prior. Efforts are underway to improve accessibility for foreigners, including a webinar on buying property. Japanese warships will visit a China-funded Cambodian naval base as a sign of friendship. A Cairo hospital successfully performed an EPS sheet transplant on a diabetic patient, the first such clinical application in Japan. The Hotel Association of the Northern Mariana Islands, HALMI, is pushing for the restoration and expansion of flight services from Japan and China to boost tourism. Concerning United States-Japan relations, Richard Armitage, a former U.S. diplomat instrumental in strengthening bilateral ties, has died at 79. Israel, Palestine. The conflict between Israel and Palestine continues with high tensions and stalled diplomatic efforts toward a ceasefire. Israel presented a new Gaza ceasefire proposal that hinges on the disarmament of Hamas, a condition the group is unlikely to agree to. Hamas is currently reviewing the proposal, which was presented through Egyptian mediators. Recent events include Israeli military actions causing civilian casualties and damaging essential medical infrastructure. An Israeli missile struck a hospital in Gaza, resulting in the death of a security guard, following an earlier attack on the Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza City. Separately, 2 paramedics died when an ambulance operated by the Red Crescent was hit by Israeli fire near Rafah. Earlier, a team of Palestinian rescue workers and medics went missing in southern Gaza, and their bodies were later found in a mass grave. The United Nations has characterized the humanitarian situation in the region as the most severe it has been in the last 18 months of conflict. Lebanon. Turning to Lebanon, the United Nations reports that at least 71 civilians have been killed by Israeli actions since the ceasefire. Israel recently launched a new attack in southern Lebanon, resulting in 1 death and 3 injuries. United States. In the United States, Harvard University is facing the potential loss of US $2 in funding after reportedly rejecting demands from the White House. These demands were allegedly aimed at addressing anti-Semitism in the wake of student protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. United States faces potential trade shifts as President Trump considers new tariffs on computer chips and drugs to incentivize domestic factory relocation using a national security statute. Halt. The proposed tariffs on drug imports present political risks, potentially leading to higher costs, rationing, and shortages. China and India are significant producers of generic drugs, while expensive patented medications are more often manufactured in Europe or the United States. NVIDIA will begin manufacturing its AI supercomputers in the United States for the first time. Turning to New Zealand, Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters emphasized the increasing importance of the country's Pacific ties with the United States, particularly after his Hawaii visit as part of his Pacific tour. Meanwhile, in El Salvador, Martinez Hernandez was convicted for his involvement in the deadly attack of a Maryland hiker after illegally entering the United States. He is also accused of killing another woman in El Salvador and linked to a 2023 home invasion in Los Angeles. Sudan is currently grappling with a devastating humanitarian crisis. The civil war is now entering its third year. Escalating violence, widespread atrocities, and looming famine plague the nation. The United Nations characterizes the situation as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Millions face starvation. Civilian deaths in Darfur attacks have exceeded 300. An international conference convened in London to mobilize aid for Sudan. The UK hosted ministers from 20 countries aiming to restart peace talks. However, these talks are overshadowed by crises in Ukraine and Gaza. Achieving peace remains elusive, complicated by the absence of key protagonists. Shifting focus to the United Arab Emirates, UAE. The nation faces increasing scrutiny amid the critical peace talks concerning Sudan. A leaked UN report alleges that the UAE has been secretly providing weapons to Sudanese paramilitaries. These alleged shipments transit through Chad. The accusations have triggered concerns about the UAE's potential role in fueling the ongoing conflict. The UAE has firmly denied these allegations. The United States is encountering resistance in its nuclear negotiations with Iran, particularly over the U.S. proposal that Iran transfer its enriched uranium to a third country, such as Russia. This proposal aims to diminish Iran's nuclear capacity and deter the creation of nuclear arms. President Trump has characterized the talks as slow-moving. Initial discussions occurred between Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi and Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff in Muscat, Oman. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei, as reported by IRNA, announced that the next round of Iran-US nuclear talks will also take place in Oman. The reason for relocating the talks from Rome was not detailed. Adding tension, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard declared that Iran's military strength is not open for discussion in these talks. President Trump has voiced criticism of Iran, accusing them of employing delaying strategies in the second round of nuclear discussions. Malaysia mourns the death of former Prime Minister Abdullah Ahmad Badawi at 85, remembered for his moderate politics and expanded freedoms, despite some criticisms of his leadership. Meanwhile, tensions flared as Malaysian durian farmers clashed with authorities regarding illegal orchards, resulting in the arrest of a legislator who intervened to prevent the destruction of trees in a key durian-growing area. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, in his role as a San chair, expressed optimism that his meeting with Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing would lead to positive developments, although the meeting has faced criticism for potentially legitimizing the isolated junta. Further solidifying international ties, Chinese leader Xi Jinping visited Malaysia to commemorate 50 years of bilateral relations and was greeted by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Wadi's visit comes at a time of increasing trade friction caused by U.S. tariffs, leading some to suggest that historical precedents, like the Ming Dynasty, could inspire unity and engagement among countries of the global South in the face of imperialistic rhetoric. France is grappling with coordinated attacks on its prisons. These include gunfire and arson. The counter-terrorism prosecutor is investigating the wave of incidents. Justice Minister believes drug traffickers are retaliating. They are responding to new anti-narcotics measures. The Toulon-la-Falaise prison was targeted by gunmen. Other facilities have faced vehicle fires and arson. Syria is grappling with the aftermath of a fatal stabbing in England. Ahmad Namdo al-Ibrahim, a 16-year-old Syrian refugee, was killed in Huddersfield. Residents raised £15,000 sterling to return his body to his parents in Syria. He was remembered as a promising young man with aspirations of becoming a doctor. Back in Syria, revenge attacks targeting Alawite civilians continue. The religious minority lives in fear amid ongoing violence. Dozens of deaths have been reported since early April. Symbols of the Bashar al-Assad regime are being destroyed. These acts include defacing images of Assad and his family. The destruction reflects the regime's weakening hold and provides catharsis for some Syrians. U.S. budget cuts have impacted war crimes investigations in Syria. These cuts, implemented under the Trump administration, delay justice for families of the disappeared. The shifts in U.S. foreign policy led to upheaval at the State Department and the absorption of USAID. The loss of USAID funding specifically affected the search for truth regarding atrocities committed during Syria's civil war. India is taking multiple steps to bolster its environmental and economic resilience. Delhi is conducting a tree census to combat desertification, pollution, and climate change. In response to the U.S. suspension of tariffs, Indian manufacturers are proactively adapting by re-evaluating their export strategies, diminishing reliance on the U.S. market, and focusing on cultivating new markets to maintain competitive. Furthermore, India is evaluating the potential adoption of East Japan Railway Co.'s next generation Shinkansen bullet train for a high-speed rail project in its western region. However, despite potential gains from the trade war between the U.S. and China, Indian manufacturers face challenges, including shortages of skilled labor, difficulties in sourcing components, and bureaucratic obstacles. Fugitive Chiwala Mehul Choksi, wanted by India in connection with a major financial scandal involving a publicly owned bank, has been arrested in Antwerp, Belgium. Nigeria is facing increased violence, particularly in the north-central region, where conflicts between herders and farmers are intensifying. President Bola Tinubu reported an attack on the Zaid community, with initial reports indicating Muslim gunmen, believed to be herders, targeted a Christian farming community, resulting in at least 40 deaths. A Red Cross source, however, reported 52 deaths in Plateau State stemming from attacks by unidentified assailants. President Tinubu has ordered an investigation into the Zaid attack and offered condolences to the bereaved families. The violence underscores persistent security issues and disputes over land resources in this religiously diverse area. Singapore is gearing up for an election on May 3rd, presenting Prime Minister Lawrence Wong with his first electoral test. The upcoming vote, triggered by the dissolution of Parliament, is widely viewed as a gauge of his leadership amid a backdrop of global instability. Key considerations for voters include Wong's strategies for navigating Trump's trade policies and addressing Malaysia's talent outflow. Adding to the political landscape, former President Halima Yaakob is lodging a police report concerning a deepfake video critical of the government. She is also alerting Facebook users to the possible impact of AI on voter sentiment. Maritime security is also a concern as the International Maritime Bureau, Bay, has reported an increase in piracy incidents in the waters between Singapore and Indonesia so far this year. Algeria expelled 12 French officials amidst escalating tensions. This action follows accusations implicating an Algerian official in the kidnapping of Amira Boroui, an influencer granted political asylum in France. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot responded, stating he was ready to act, signaling a potential diplomatic escalation. Australia is grappling with concerns over potential electricity shortages sparked by opposition leader Peter Dutton's ambitious nuclear power proposal. The Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis cautions that the coalition's strategy might be overly optimistic about the dependability of Australia's older coal-fired power plants. Their analysis indicates this could impede the growth of renewable energy sources. Adding a unique dimension to political engagement, Greens MP Stephen Bates has launched an OnlyFans account to promote awareness and support the Greens' policy advocating for free access to PrEP and PEP, crucial HIV prevention medications. Pakistan is currently navigating a complex landscape of internal security threats and delicate international relations. The nation is actively seeking full cooperation from Tehran, following the tragic killing of 8 Pakistani nationals in southeastern Iran. Domestically, Pakistan remains vigilant against persistent security threats. A recent remote-controlled bomb attack on a police bus resulted in the deaths of 3 officers and left 18 others injured. In a separate incident, an explosion struck a police vehicle in Balochistan province, claiming the lives of at least 3 officers, with no group yet claiming responsibility. Furthermore, Pakistan has expedited the deportation of Afghan nationals, a move that has seen nearly 60,000 individuals crossing back into Afghanistan since the beginning of April, as reported by the UN. China's President Xi Jinping honored Ho Chi Minh in Hanoi. This gesture has drawn attention, with President Trump suggesting it's a move against US influence. Meanwhile, Chinese factories in Vietnam are benefiting from a surge in orders. This is a direct result of the temporary halt on US tariffs, prompting US companies to accelerate shipments. Turning to Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City is set to ban classes after 8 p.m. The aim is to alleviate student stress and decrease reliance on private tutoring. Separately, Vietnam is experiencing a rise in war-related tourism. 50 years after the war, battlefields are attracting veterans and tourists. Ghana is set to enact a ban on foreign involvement in its local gold trading sector, starting May 1. The ban aims to restructure the industry. It specifically targets the extensive participation of Chinese nationals in informal gold mining and trading. A new regulatory body in Ghana announced the prohibition. The prohibition covers the purchase and trade of gold mined on a small scale domestically. Global markets responded positively to President Trump's decision to ease tariffs on electronics. The move lessened trade tension. Market indices rose, including a 1% increase in the Dow Jones. The S&P 500 also saw an increase of 145%. South Korea is boosting its semiconductor industry support to $23 billion, a move partly influenced by expected tariffs from a potential Trump administration in the U.S. The nation exported $70 billion in chips to the U.S. last year. Furthermore, the airport involved in the Jeju Air Flight 2216 crash in December, which tragically resulted in 179 deaths, had previously failed to comply with international and domestic safety standards aimed at preventing bird strikes. In the United States, a judge has issued a temporary block on the Trump administration's efforts to end a Biden-era program. This program provides temporary legal status and work permits to around 500,000 migrants. These migrants are from Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Haiti. The program's termination was initially planned for April 24. The judge's order provides a temporary reprieve for these migrants. United States former President Trump is advocating for increased U.S. chicken and egg exports to Europe despite regulatory hurdles. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance suggested that European nations should have shown greater autonomy by questioning Washington's policies, specifically regarding the Iraq War. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing increasing pressure regarding housing affordability. New policies are being debated to address rising costs and limited availability across the country. In the latest from France, President Emmanuel Macron is working to solidify alliances in the wake of recent geopolitical shifts. His administration is focused on maintaining stability within the European Union amidst ongoing economic concerns. Along the Mexico border, the Trump administration is establishing a U.S. Army base. This grants the military control over land. Migrants could be detained there. The move circumvents federal law. This law restricts using U.S. troops for domestic law enforcement. Indonesia's Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto has denied reports of Russia seeking to station military aircraft in the country, specifically at Biak, dismissing the Jane's report as false. Meanwhile, a new regulation in Indonesia now requires foreign journalists to obtain police certification, raising alarms about potential restrictions on press freedom. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address rising housing costs, with recent data revealing a significant surge in rental prices across major cities. The opposition is calling for immediate action, including increased investment in affordable housing and tighter regulations on real estate speculation, as affordability becomes a key political battleground. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is navigating a fresh wave of protests against pension reforms, with unions organizing nationwide strikes that have disrupted transportation and public services. The reforms, which raise the retirement age, have met with widespread opposition and pose a significant challenge to Macron's administration. Meanwhile, in Germany, Chancellor Olaf Scholz's coalition government is grappling with a budget crisis as disagreements persist over spending priorities and fiscal policies. The coalition partners are struggling to reconcile their differing economic visions, potentially impacting Germany's economic stability and its role within the European Union. Indonesia is set to receive a substantial boost to its sovereign wealth fund. Qatar has pledged a $2 billion investment in Danantara, Indonesia. President Prabowo Subianto initiated the fund in February. The aim is to accelerate the nation's economic growth. The target is to increase annual growth from 5% to 8%. Government cuts are planned to support the fund's objectives. United States authorities are investigating the collapse of a sightseeing helicopter operated by New York Helicopter Tour. After the fatal crash into the Hudson River on Thursday, the AA grounded the company. 5 Spanish tourists and the pilot died in the accident. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed condolences to the families of the victims of the helicopter crash. Trudeau reaffirmed Canada's commitment to working with international partners to enhance aviation safety standards. The Prime Minister also highlighted ongoing investments in infrastructure to support safe air travel. In China, trade talks with the United States remain uncertain despite recent high-level discussions. Chinese officials emphasized the need for mutual respect and equality in negotiations. Concerns persist regarding tariffs and intellectual property rights. Moving to the United Kingdom, Brexit negotiations are at a critical juncture as the deadline approaches. Prime Minister Theresa May is facing increasing pressure to secure a deal acceptable to both the EU and Parliament. The possibility of a no-deal Brexit looms large, raising concerns about economic disruption. Finland recently celebrated a victory in the Women's Ice Hockey World Championship, defeating Switzerland 2-1, with a notable short-handed goal by Ronja Savolainen. Meanwhile, Rovaniemi, Finland, the the self-proclaimed official hometown of Santa Claus, is experiencing a complex relationship with its burgeoning year-round tourist season, as some residents voice concerns about the impact. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, an ideological ally of former US President Donald Trump, is preparing for an upcoming visit to Washington. This visit presents a delicate balancing act for Meloni, requiring her to nurture relations with the US while also upholding her commitments to European Union partners. It's worth noting that Meloni and Trump were previously seen together at a dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace, an event that followed the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Peru mourns the loss of Mario Vargas Llosa, the Nobel laureate novelist who passed away at 89. He was known for his ability to translate personal experiences into universally appealing literature. Vargas Llosa also ran for president of Peru in 1990. Notably, he was the first writer admitted to the Académie Française without original works in French. Iraq is grappling with a major sandstorm, the most intense of the year thus far. The storm enveloped the southern part of the country in an orange haze. Airport operations were suspended as a result. Over 3,500 individuals sought medical attention in hospitals due to respiratory problems. Climate scientists have noted a worrying trend of increasing sandstorm frequency and intensity in Iraq. New Zealand has just released a children's book highlighting Niuean culture, strengthening regional cultural bonds. Simultaneously, worries are emerging about seasonal employment prospects in New Zealand and Australia for Pacific Islanders. Furthermore, a powerful storm heading towards New Zealand has intensified into a tropical cyclone. The Upper North Island is bracing for substantial weather disruptions, expected to start late Wednesday and persist through Thursday. Germany recently saw a man fined for a security breach at Frankfurt Airport in 2023. He infiltrated Chancellor Olaf Scholz's VIP convoy and hugged the Chancellor. Scholz was about to board a plane when the incident occurred. In related news, Irmgard Forschner, a 99-year-old former Nazi concentration camp secretary, has died. She was convicted of being an accessory to the murders of over 10,000 people in German-occupied Poland. Hungary's government recently approved a constitutional amendment restricting LGBTQ public gatherings, sparking protests in Budapest, where demonstrators attempted to block access to the parliament. The amendment further empowers authorities to employ facial recognition technology to identify participants at these restricted events. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures to combat online hate speech. The proposed legislation will require social media platforms to remove harmful content within 24 hours. Failure to comply could result in significant financial penalties for these companies. In the latest from France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing renewed scrutiny over his pension reform. Unions are planning further strikes and protests in response to the changes, which raise the retirement age. The reforms have already triggered widespread unrest across the country. Meanwhile, Germany is grappling with rising inflation rates. The government is considering additional financial aid packages to help citizens cope with the increased cost of living. The economic challenges are impacting consumer confidence and business investments. Shifting to Japan, the government has approved a new defense budget. The increase is intended to bolster the country's military capabilities in response to regional security concerns. The move reflects a shift in Japan's defense policy. In Brazil, President Lula da Silva is pushing for stronger environmental protections in the Amazon rainforest. He has pledged to crack down on illegal logging and mining activities. His administration is seeking international support for these efforts. Lastly, India is preparing for upcoming national elections. Political parties are campaigning intensely across the country. The outcome of the elections could significantly impact India's economic and social policies. Canada's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, with connections to the MAGA movement, foresees possible advantages for her party and province. This is amidst the difficulties Canada might face due to President Trump's policies. Turning to France, the nation is grappling with widespread protests and strikes against President Macron's pension reforms. These reforms propose raising the retirement age. The unrest has disrupted various sectors. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing increasing pressure to address the ongoing cost of living crisis. Inflation remains high, impacting households across the country. The government is exploring measures to alleviate financial burdens. Over in Germany, Chancellor Olaf Scholz is working to balance economic stability with environmental goals. The country is committed to transitioning to renewable energy sources. However, this transition poses challenges to its industrial sector. Meanwhile, China is asserting its economic influence in Asia and beyond. The Belt and Road Initiative continues to expand. This initiative aims to improve infrastructure and trade routes across multiple continents. Across the Pacific, in Japan, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is focused on strengthening national security. This comes amid rising regional tensions. Japan is increasing its defense spending and enhancing alliances with key partners. Shifting to Russia, President Vladimir Putin is navigating international sanctions and maintaining domestic stability. The war in Ukraine continues to impact Russia's economy and global relations. Diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict are ongoing. Focusing on Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky is seeking further international support. This support is for his country's defense against Russian aggression. Humanitarian aid and military assistance are crucial for Ukraine's survival. In the United States, President Joe Biden is pushing forward with his domestic agenda. This agenda includes infrastructure development and climate change initiatives. He is also addressing challenges related to immigration and healthcare. Understood. I am ready to receive the news articles and begin crafting the summaries according to the specified guidelines. Fiji's meteorological service has upgraded a tropical low over Vanuatu to a tropical cyclone. Simultaneously, Fiji is addressing a dengue outbreak by advising tourists to take standard health precautions. The tourism minister has assured the public that key tourism areas remain unaffected by the outbreak. Philippines and the United States are gearing up for extensive Balikatan exercises, featuring advanced military deployments such as the Typhoon missile system, a move anticipated to draw criticism from China. Shifting to Lebanon, analysts suggest that U.S. pressure could facilitate the disarming of Hezbollah. This assessment stems from the group's vulnerabilities post-conflict with Israel and Lebanon's recent strides in electing a president and establishing a government. Meanwhile, in Sweden, authorities have concluded their probe into the Baltic Sea cable cuts, finding no definitive evidence of Chinese vessel involvement, though a separate investigation continues. In Argentina, the Antarctic cruise industry, particularly those departing from Ushuaia, has seen a surge in popularity, boosting the local economy. However, this increase is straining local resources and the environment, especially impacting penguin habitats. Moving to Afghanistan, the women's cricket team is receiving heightened support from the sport's governing body, marking progress after years of struggle for recognition and resources. Turning to Cambodia, a strengthened ban on genocide denial raises concerns it could be used to suppress dissent against the Hun Sen dynasty. Critics worry the law will criminalize discussions of the Khmer Rouge's atrocities, limiting freedom of speech. Over in Venezuela, the country's economic and political instability is influencing baseball, its national sport, causing Venezuelan baseball players to seek opportunities in Europe. At the 2025 World Expo in Osaka, Japan, the Emperor of Japan met with the President of Turkmenistan during Turkmenistan's National Day event. Finally, in Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro is in intensive care after undergoing a 12-hour bowel surgery. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.